Your job at home is to take care of the dog. We're going to Italy. That was what was written on the piece of paper my parents left for my 8-year-old daughter. At that time, I was on a business trip 200 miles away from home. I'd sent my daughter to stay with them for a week, along with $1,500. When I thought everything was fine, they abandoned my daughter at home alone, with the responsibility of taking care of the dog, so that they could take their golden grandchild on a trip to Italy. I didn't let it slide easily. With the help of my 85-year-old grandma, they had to learn their lesson the hard way. Before I delve into the details of this story, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to you for choosing to listen to our story today. Hello, everyone. I'm Javier, a 40-year-old software engineer based in San Jose. Currently, I live with my 10-year-old daughter and my 87-year-old grandmother. My daughter's name is Amelia, and she's really smart and understanding. We moved to San Jose 2 years ago and are still rebuilding our lives. If someone asked me what I regret most in my life, I'd answer right away without thinking. What I regret most in my life is sending my daughter to stay with my parents in 2023. And even though 2 years have passed, I still can't forget what happened. The story I'm sharing today occurred on November 22, 2023. Back then, my daughter and I were still living in Chicago. Maybe people will ask me why I can remember the exact date like that. The answer's straightforward. That's the day my parents oppressed my daughter, and also the day I realized the true face of the people who brought me into this world. That day, I was on a week-long business trip in Indianapolis for my company. Since Indianapolis is about 200 miles from Chicago, I decided to stay in Indianapolis to make work easier. My daughter was only 8 years old then. Since my parents' house was pretty close to mine, only about 10 miles away from mine, I sent her to stay with them and asked them to take care of her. During the business trip, I called my parents every day to see my daughter in the evenings. Those short video calls were the only way I could see Amelia's smile after a tiring day of work. But that day, I couldn't get through to them. My first call was to Mom at 7 p.m. No signal. I thought maybe Mom's phone died. I told myself that to calm down. I called back just 5 minutes later, but still no signal. Now I was getting worried, so I switched to calling Dad. The following 3 calls to Dad still had no signal. My anxiety was growing bigger and bigger. I started asking myself where they had gone, what had happened, and why both Dad's and Mom's phones had no signal. After a few seconds of hesitation, I remembered that my sister, Tessa, also lives near my parents' house. I hit her number and called right away. What was surprising was that my sister's phone also had no signal. Where did they all go together? Why did all the phone numbers in my family have no signal? That question kept appearing in my thoughts, like a whirlpool with no way out. My heart was beating faster, and an uncomfortable, restless feeling spread through my whole body. About 2 minutes later, I decided to call Stephen, the 70-year-old neighbor right next to my parents' house. He was the only person I could think of in this panic. The phone rang for a few seconds, then Stephen picked up. His voice came through warm and familiar like always. I quickly asked him if he knew where my parents went. After a moment of silence, Stephen slowly replied, "I saw your parents with your sister and her daughter this afternoon getting into a taxi. They had a lot of suitcases." Hearing this, I felt really worried. My chest felt like someone was squeezing it. I quickly asked him, "What about my daughter? Did you see my daughter go with them?" Silence for a few seconds. That silence felt like a century. Finally, Stephen replied with a hesitant voice. "No, definitely not. I thought you'd already picked up the kid." I felt like someone had just splashed cold water on my face. I replied with a shaky voice, "I haven't picked her up. I'm still on a business trip in Indianapolis." Right after I finished speaking, Stephen exclaimed with surprise, "That's really weird then. I didn't see Amelia anywhere." Stephen's words made me feel like I was about to collapse. I said with a voice almost like begging, "Please, Stephen, could you help me go to my parents' house and check for me?" Stephen replied immediately, without any hesitation, "Sure, give me 10 minutes. After saying that, he hung up. As for me, my heart felt like thousands of flames were burning inside. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding my head with both hands, trying to breathe deeply, but couldn't. Every second that passed felt like an hour. I prayed that God would protect my daughter and keep her safe. After almost 10 minutes of waiting, Stephen finally called me back. I picked up the phone as soon as the screen lit up. Without waiting for me to speak, Stephen spoke first. His voice was a bit shaky when he said to me, "Oh my God, Javier, they left the kid at home alone. Lucky she's still safe." I was stunned by what he said. The world around me seemed to stop spinning in that moment. I quickly said, my voice choking, "Please, let me talk to my daughter." Stephen replied gently, "Sure." Right after that, the phone was passed to Amelia. Amelia's shaky voice came through the phone, and every word she said was like needles stabbing straight into my heart. "Dad, come home to me. I'm so scared. Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Tessa, and Roman all went on vacation. They left me at home alone." Hearing my daughter's voice, tears naturally flowed down my face. I tried to calm my daughter with the most composed voice I could. "It's okay now, Amelia. Go over to Mr. Stevens' house. He'll take care of you. I'll be home to you in 4 hours." Hearing me say that, Amelia almost shouted with a hopeful voice, "You mean it, Dad? I'll stay awake waiting for you to come home. I'll wait for you." Hearing what my daughter said, my heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. My daughter had already lost her mother, and now my parents had the heart to leave her alone at home to go on vacation. But what hurt me the most was Amelia's strength. She didn't cry after everything that happened. Maybe the absence of a mother's love had made her stronger than other kids her age. And that very strength hurt me more than anything else. After telling her a few more things, I asked her to return the phone to Mr. Stephen. As soon as Stephen got the phone back, I said to him with an urgent voice, "Stephen, please help me. I'm going back to Chicago right now. Please let Amelia come to your house while I drive back." Stephen immediately replied without needing to think, "Sure. You drive carefully. I'll take care of the kid." After saying that, he paused a bit, then continued with a more serious voice. "Also, call 911. Your daughter was left home alone. This is really dangerous. I'll be your witness." Hearing what Stephen said, I felt a deep sense of gratitude in my heart. I quickly thanked him, then hung up and prepared to return to Chicago. After ending the call, I grabbed my keys and rushed out to the car. I even forgot to lock the door of my hotel room. On the drive back to Chicago, the first thing I did was call 911 and report Amelia's situation. My voice was still shaking when I told them what happened. After I gave them my parents' address, the 911 operator said they'd send police for support along with medical personnel. After hanging up, I felt a bit more relieved and was able to focus more on driving. However, I still had one important task to complete, reporting to my director about the unexpected incident so the company could arrange the necessary work. Right after that, I called my boss. After my boss heard me explain, he was completely understanding. He told me to drive carefully and not to worry about work. I felt lucky to have met a director who knew how to empathize with his employees. At least in this terrible night, there were still good people beside me. After almost 4 hours of continuous driving, I got back to Chicago around 11 p.m. Because of traffic, I couldn't get back any earlier. When I just turned onto the familiar street, the police car and ambulance were still parked in front of Stephen's house. They'd been waiting for me to come back. I parked the car and dashed into Stephen's house. As soon as she saw me appear at the door, Amelia, who was sitting on the sofa, shouted, "Dad!" After that shout, she dashed toward me. Her little legs crossed the living room in just a moment. As soon as she hugged me, she cried her heart out, her whole body shaking in waves. Her voice was choked up. "Dad, I missed you. You're back." I held my daughter tight, whispering in her ear, "I'm back now. Be good. I'll never leave you alone again." After almost 2 minutes, Amelia finally stopped crying. I still didn't let her go, still kept her in my arms like I was afraid that if I let go, she'd disappear. At this point, a police officer came closer to me. He was a middle-aged man with a kind face. He told me what had happened. The police officer's voice was steady but full of sympathy when he said, "We came to Mr. Stevens' house at 8 p.m. When we got there, the medical staff checked on Amelia. Luckily, she wasn't hurt, and there were no health problems either." Hearing this, I felt somewhat relieved. A few seconds later, the officer continued talking to me. After confirming Amelia was completely healthy, they encouraged Amelia to tell them everything, and my daughter told them the details of what happened. According to what the police officer told me, Amelia said that at noon that day, my parents were still at home. Tessa and her son, Roman, were also there. The whole family had lunch together, and Amelia didn't notice anything unusual at all. She just thought it was weird that Roman was dressed nicer than usual, but she didn't ask. Around 1 p.m., after finishing eating, my mom told Amelia to take a nap. She obediently did what she was told because that was my daughter's daily routine. But at 4 p.m., when she woke up, the house was utterly silent. She called for Grandma, but there was no answer. She called for Grandpa, but there was still silence. She ran around looking through all the rooms, from the living room to the kitchen, from the backyard to the garage, but there was no sign of anyone. When Amelia went down to the living room, she saw a piece of paper lying on the table. She picked it up and read it, and that's when she realized she'd been left behind. The police officer then showed me the small piece of paper, which was kept in a clear plastic bag. He explained that's what they found on the kitchen table at my parents' house. I took it, and when I read those scribbled lines on it, the blood in my body felt like it was boiling. My mom's familiar handwriting appeared before my eyes. "We're going to Italy. Your job at home is to take care of the dog." I read and reread that line 3 times, unable to believe my eyes. I realized they'd planned this. They waited for Amelia to take her nap, then quietly left. They took Roman, their beloved grandchild, on a trip to Italy. And Amelia, my daughter, a child who'd lost her mother, was left behind in an empty house with the only job of taking care of the dog. After showing me the piece of paper, the police officer continued telling me that Amelia had been alone in that house for many hours. My parents didn't leave any phone behind. She also didn't dare leave the house because she was scared. She just sat on the sofa, hugging a pillow, and waited. She waited for someone to come back, waited for anything to happen. When Stephen knocked on the door at 7 p.m., she'd been sitting like that for almost 3 hours. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just sat there, silent, alone. Hearing this, my hand gripped the paper so tight it was almost crumpled. The anger rising in me was like a huge flame. I wanted to scream, wanted to break something, but I knew Amelia was here. I couldn't let her see me lose control. I tried to imagine my daughter sitting alone in that empty, quiet house. An 8-year-old child woke up from her afternoon nap and discovered she'd been abandoned. No explanation, no phone call, just a cold piece of paper with writing that treated her like a housekeeper. And during all those hours, she had to face fear and loneliness by herself. The police officer looked at me with understanding eyes. He gently said, "I understand how you feel. We'll report this incident to CPS. They'll contact you in the next few days." I nodded, trying to swallow down my anger. After the police and medical staff left, I turned to Stephen. He was still standing there, silently looking at me with worried eyes. I stepped forward, gripped his hand tight, and said with all my gratitude, "Thank you, Stephen. I don't know what else to say." Stephen patted my shoulder, cutting me off, and said, "Stop. Don't say anymore. Take the kid home. She needs to rest." I nodded, then took Amelia's hand and left Stephen's house. On the way home, my daughter didn't say anything, just held my hand tight like she was afraid I'd disappear. That night I couldn't sleep. After putting Amelia to bed and waiting for her to fall asleep, I went down to the living room, sitting alone in the darkness. Memories of the past came rushing back like slow-motion film clips. Before 2021, I used to have a happy family. My wife was a nurse at the hospital at the time, and I was a manager for a tech company in Chicago. We had a 3-bedroom house with a big yard where my daughter could ride her bike every afternoon. Life wasn't super rich, but it was full and warm. But then, disaster struck. Disease took away the wife I loved most in the world in August 2021. From that day on, I became a single dad taking care of Amelia. The days after my wife died were the darkest time in my life. I had to work, take care of my daughter, and try not to collapse under the pain of loss. Amelia was only 6 years old then, and she needed me. That was the only reason that kept me going each day. I kept thinking that after my wife died, my family would love Amelia more. I kept thinking that my parents would make up for some of the missing mother's love for my daughter. But what they did that day really hit my limit. What made me angrier than anything was realizing they'd planned the Italy trip. When I got this business trip, I called and asked my parents if they could take care of Amelia. At that time, they hesitated and didn't answer. I still clearly remember that long silence over the phone, and I naively thought they were considering their schedule. I offered to send them an extra $1,500 for the week my daughter would stay at my parents' house, and they agreed. $1,500. They took my money, then abandoned my daughter. They took Roman, Tessa's daughter, on a trip to Italy, while Amelia was left at home alone with the job of taking care of the dog. I sat there, in the darkness, asking myself what I'd done wrong. Why did my parents treat my daughter like that? Why did Amelia have to endure this? She'd already lost her mother, and now the remaining family members didn't think anything of her either. After everything they did to my daughter, I decided I wouldn't forgive them. Never. The next morning, after breakfast, I took my daughter to my grandma's house. My grandma was 85 years old at the time, living alone in a small house in suburban Chicago. She was the only person in the family I still trusted. When we got there, Grandma was sitting on the front porch, sipping tea like every morning. Seeing Amelia and me, she smiled and waved. After Amelia ran inside to watch TV, I sat down next to Grandma. I took a deep breath, then said to her, "Grandma, I have something I want to tell you." Grandma looked at me, her eyes worried. She quickly asked back, "What is it? You look terrible." After that, I told Grandma everything that had happened. From not being able to contact my parents, to Stephen discovering Amelia home alone, to the note they left behind. I provided every detail, leaving nothing out. When I finished telling the story, Grandma's face had completely changed color. She gripped the chair handle tight, hissing through her teeth. Are they even human anymore? They're worse than animals. I'd never heard Grandma curse like that. She was always calm and gentle. But now, I could see the anger burning in her eyes. After a moment of silence, I said to her, "Grandma, I have a request. Please let me take in advance the inheritance that I'm supposed to get after you pass away." As soon as I mentioned the inheritance, Grandma looked at me and asked, "Which part do you want?" I answered immediately, "Half of the house that my parents are living in. That house, according to your announcement 3 years ago, after you pass away, will be divided between Tessa and me." Hearing my request, Grandma was silent for a long time. I could see she was thinking, considering. Finally, she asked me, "What are you planning to do with that house?" I replied with a cold voice, "I want them to pay the price for what they did to Amelia." Grandma nodded slowly. Then she said, her voice like steel, "I understand. I'll handle this for you." I trusted Grandma's words. I didn't ask anything more, because I knew when she said something, she'd do it. After leaving Grandma's house, I carried out the next step in my plan. I contacted the Animal Protection Office. I reported to them that my parents had gone on a trip to Italy and forced my 10-year-old daughter to stay behind to take care of their pet dog. The Animal Protection Society quickly came to my parents' house and took their dog away. On top of that, they recorded the incident of my parents neglecting the animal, not taking care of their dog. Perhaps after they returned from their trip, they'd have to spend a lot more money to be able to get their beloved dog back. And that was just the beginning. 2 days later, CPS workers came to my house to document the incident. The person who came was a middle-aged woman with a kind face, accompanied by a younger man, who was probably a new employee. I invited them into the living room. At that time, Amelia was in her room, and I called her out. When Amelia appeared, I sat down at her eye level, gently saying, "Amelia, the CPS workers want to hear you tell them what happened that day. Can you tell them about it?" Amelia looked at me, then looked at the 2 CPS workers. She nodded lightly. The woman smiled at Amelia, her voice gentle. "Just take your time telling us. No need to rush." A few seconds later, Amelia began telling the detailed story that my daughter had told the police 2 days earlier. Sitting, listening to my daughter tell the story, my whole body was almost shaking. My hand gripped the chair arm tight, trying to control the anger boiling inside me. If my parents and Tessa had been there, I definitely wouldn't have been able to control myself. After Amelia finished telling the story, the woman wrote everything down. She looked at me with sympathetic eyes, then said, "We'll put this incident on file. Her grandparents will have to face legal responsibility." I nodded and thanked them, and that was what I wanted. 3 days after I went to see Grandma, Grandma called me and told me to come to the lawyer's office. When I got there, Grandma was already sitting in the office, next to a middle-aged lawyer with a serious face. On the table was a stack of papers. Grandma looked at me, then pointed to the seat across from her. She said briefly, "Sit down." I sat down, not understanding what was happening. After I arrived, the lawyer started explaining. He said that Grandma had decided to transfer complete ownership of the house my parents were living in to my name. Not just half like Grandma had said before. I was stunned, turned to look at Grandma with surprised eyes. I asked her, "What about my sister Tessa's part?" Grandma looked at me, her eyes cold. "A few seconds later," she answered. "I already contacted her. She's in Italy with your parents." She paused a bit, then continued, her voice like steel. "She knew about your parents leaving Amelia at home. She knew, and she still went. I can't forgive that." Hearing what Grandma said, I was silent. I didn't know what to say. Grandma reached across the table and took my hand. Her voice softened when she said, "Amelia is a pitiful child. She's already lost her mother. And now, the people who should love her are treating her like this. I can't accept it." I was moved by what Grandma had done for Amelia and me. I held her hand tight, my throat choking up. I could only say, "Thank you, Grandma." Right after that, I signed the documents the lawyer handed out. From that moment, the house my parents were living in officially belonged to me. A week after the incident where my parents abandoned my daughter at home alone, my parents and Tessa, with her son, finally came back from Italy. That afternoon, I stood in front of the door of the house they were living in. Stephen stood next to me. He insisted on coming along because he was worried I'd do something stupid. In my hand was a notice demanding they leave the house within 30 days. This was my house now, and I had the right to decide who could stay and who had to go. When my parents opened the door and saw me, their faces changed color. Their tan skin after the trip made them look healthy and refreshed. They didn't expect me to show up here, and they definitely didn't expect what was about to happen. My mom opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off first. My voice was cold as ice when I asked her straight to her face, "Why did you leave my daughter at home alone?" My mom stammered back, "We thought you'd come back earlier. The tour was already booked and couldn't be canceled." Hearing that answer, the anger in me flared up violently. I gritted my teeth and asked again, "Couldn't be canceled? You left your 8-year-old granddaughter at home alone. Left a piece of paper telling her to take care of the dog, and you're telling me it couldn't be canceled?" Seeing me raising my voice at Mom, Dad stepped up. He roared at me, "How dare you come here and question me? I'm your father, you little brat." The moment I heard those words, I stepped forward, grabbed his collar tight, and pulled his face close to mine. My eyes looked straight into his, and I could see fear flash through them. My hand gripped tighter. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to show him what it felt like to be betrayed. My fist was ready, and I was hesitating between whether or not to let it land on the face of the man standing in front of me. Right at that moment, Stephen's voice rang out from behind, calm but decisive. "Stop it, Javier. Hitting him would dirty your hands." My dad turned to Stephen with eyes full of anger. He shouted, "Don't butt into my family business. You have no right." Stephen didn't flinch at all in front of Dad's rage. He stepped forward one step, his eyes cold when he replied, "I don't want to butt into your business, but I have to tell you, you guys are monsters. No grandparents would ever leave their grandchild at home alone to go on a trip to Italy. I've lived almost 70 years, never seen anyone so heartless." Stephen's words were like a bucket of cold water thrown straight at my dad's face. He went silent, his lips moving, but he couldn't get any words out. My mom stood behind, her face pale. I let go of Dad's collar and pushed him back a step. Then I handed the notice to my mom and said, "This is a notice requiring you both to leave this house within 30 days. This house now belongs to me." Dad snatched the paper from Mom's hand and read through it once. He stammered, What are you saying? This is my house." I replied calmly, "No, this is Grandma's house, and Grandma transferred ownership to me. You can check with a lawyer if you don't believe it." My mom started screaming. She cursed me terribly, called me a family traitor. I stood there, silently listening to them curse. I didn't argue, didn't explain. Their words couldn't touch me anymore. When they finished cursing, I only said one thing, "See you in court." After that, I turned around and walked away. Stephen walked beside me. He patted my shoulder gently but didn't say anything. That very afternoon, police also came to their house to clarify their abandoning my daughter at home alone. I wasn't there, But later I found out they tried to justify it every way they could. They used the excuse that the tour was already booked and paid for, so it couldn't be cancelled. They said they thought I'd come back earlier than expected. They blamed me for taking a business trip that was too long. But when police asked them why they had planned the trip but still agreed to take care of Amelia and accepted the extra $1,500 from me, they fell silent and hung their heads. They had no answer for that question. Their silence said it all. The most surprising thing that day was my grandma. According to what Grandma told me, that evening, my parents and Tessa went to Grandma's house to beg her to cancel the transfer of the house to my name. Grandma said they got on their knees, cried, and pleaded. They said they had nowhere to go. They said if they lost the house, their lives would collapse. Grandma refused their unreasonable request. She told them they'd destroyed everything themselves when they abandoned Amelia. She said an 8-year-old child had already lost her mother, and instead of loving and protecting her, they treated her like a servant, making her stay home to watch the dog while they went on vacation. When Grandma finished speaking, my parents and Tessa got angry. They cursed, saying Grandma was playing favorites with me. They threatened that if Grandma got old and weak later, they wouldn't take care of her. Grandma then asked them back, "You guys don't even have a house? What are you going to use to take care of me?" Grandma's question was like a fatal blow, leaving them silent. They had nothing to say back. Only after Grandma threatened to call the police did they finally leave. 2 months later, the trial took place. I sat in the courtroom, watching my parents and Tessa stand before the judge. They looked more haggard and tired than the last time I saw them. But I didn't feel sorry for them. Not one bit. After almost 3 tense hours, the judge read the verdict. My parents were sentenced by the court to 5 years probation, along with $40,000 in fines, with $30,000 in emotional damages for Amelia and $10,000 for court costs. At the same time, the court issued a restraining order for my parents and Tessa. They weren't allowed to come near Amelia or contact my daughter until my daughter turned 18. Leaving the courtroom that day, I walked past them without turning back to look. I heard my mom crying and listened to my dad calling my name, but I didn't stop. With the judge's sentence, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Justice had been served. A month after that trial, I got a job opportunity in San Jose. After considering it, my company nominated me for a new position at the company's headquarters. This was a much better position than my current one, with higher pay and broader development opportunities. I've given this decision a lot of thought. Chicago was where I'd lived almost my whole life. This was where I met my wife, where Amelia was born, where so many memories were stored. But at the same time, this was also where my parents were, where Tessa was, where painful memories I wanted to leave behind were. I decided to ask Amelia's opinion before making a decision. That evening, after dinner, I sat down next to my daughter. I told my daughter about being nominated for the new position in San Jose. I asked her if she wanted to go to San Jose. Amelia thought for almost a minute, then asked me, "Dad, if we go to San Jose, do we have to see Grandpa and Grandma anymore?" My daughter's question made my heart ache. I shook my head and replied, "No, we won't see them anymore." Amelia nodded. Then she said with a confident voice, "Then I want to go to San Jose." I hugged her, whispering, "Thank you." That week, I went to see Grandma to share the news with her. After hearing my decision, Grandma was silent. I could see she was thinking about something. After almost 10 minutes, she said, her voice gentle but firm, "Let me come with you." I was surprised by Grandma's decision. I asked again, "Are you serious, Grandma? San Jose is thousands of miles from here." Grandma smiled and replied, "I know, but I have nothing left here. My son and my daughter-in-law have disappointed me. The only people I want to be with are you and Amelia." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and held her hand tight. That same month, Grandma and I sold everything in Chicago and moved to San Jose. We started a new life, in a new place, where there were no painful memories, no people who had betrayed us. Almost 2 years have passed since that incident. My grandma is now 87 years old. She lives with us in the house I bought in San Jose. Her health is still good, and every day, hearing her talk with Amelia is my happiness. Amelia is now 10 years old. She's grown up healthy and happy. She has new friends at school and can go to the beach every weekend, just like I promised. Sometimes, she still asks about her mom, and I tell her stories about the wonderful woman she didn't get a chance to know. As for my parents and Tessa through a few relatives, I know they're still looking for us. They want to contact us, want to see Amelia again, and want to see Grandma again. But no matter how hard they try, they can't find us. I've blocked all their contact, and no one in the family, including relatives, knows where we're living. Sometimes, on late nights, I still think about them. I wonder how they're living, whether they regret what they did. But then I remember that note. Remember Amelia's scared face when she was left alone, and I know I did the right thing. Through today's story, I have 3 pieces of advice to share with you. First, always prioritize your children. No matter what happens, children shouldn't be the ones who have to suffer the consequences. They're innocent, and they deserve to be loved and protected. Second, never trust anyone unquestioningly, even family members. I learned this lesson the hard way. Sometimes, the people who should love you most are the ones who hurt you the most. Third, know when to let go. Forgiveness is noble, but some lines shouldn't be crossed. When someone hurts your child, you have the right to protect your child at all costs, even when that means cutting ties with the people who brought you into this world. When I told this story to a few people I know, they had very different opinions. Some people said I did the right thing in cutting ties with them. They told me that what my parents did was unforgivable, and I had the right to protect my daughter. But some people also thought I was too extreme. They said no matter what, my parents were still the people who brought me into this world. They advised that Grandma and I should give them a chance to reconcile so that they could live peacefully for their remaining days. What do you think about this advice? Please feel free to leave your opinion in the comments below the story. And if this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and share the story. My story ends here. Thanks for following this long story. See you in the following one. If your family sold the house that holds memories of your late wife, dumped your 8-year-old son outside the gate like garbage, then headed to the airport to escape to Europe before you could get home, what would you do? I used to think blood was everything, until I realized people are willing to abandon their own grandson in the blazing Texas heat to catch a flight to Paris. They thought once they got on that plane, I couldn't do anything about it. They were wrong. All it took was one phone call, and 45 minutes later, they paid dearly for their cruelty. Before I get into the details, thank you for choosing our story among the hundreds on this entertainment platform. Hello everyone, I'm Graham, 37, a commercial pilot. The story I'm about to tell happened at the end of August last year, when I just finished a 6-day flight rotation from Tokyo back to Austin. 6 days away from home. For people in other jobs, that doesn't sound long. But when you're a single dad with a kid, 6 days feels like 6 weeks. Every night, lying in that Tokyo hotel, I'd video call Milo before bed. The little guy would always ask, "How many more days until you come home?" As if he were counting down every single hour. My wife Rachel died almost 3 years before this happened. Complications after surgery that the doctors said were routine. I was somewhere over the Pacific when she passed. Didn't make it home in time. Didn't get to say anything. That's something I have to live with every day. After Rachel died, I had my parents, Raymond and Diane, watch Milo whenever I had flights. They lived close by. Milo had known them since he was little. It was the most logical arrangement. Dad would pick him up from school, feed him, and take him to swimming lessons on weekends. 3 years running like this, no problems at all. The house my son and I were living in was left to us by Rachel's parents. They died in a car accident just 6 months before Rachel passed. They left the house to their daughter and son-in-law, their way of saying we want you kids to have a place to call home. The house was in Dripping Springs outside Austin, on an oversized lot, almost a mile from the nearest neighbor. Quiet, isolated, but it was home. For me, that house wasn't just 4 walls. Rachel's perfume still lingered in the closet. Her reading corner was the same. Milo would sit in Mom's room whenever he missed her, talking to himself like Rachel was still there somewhere. I didn't dare to clean up anything. That afternoon, the plane touched down at Austin Bergstrom around 6 p.m. I grabbed my car from long-term parking and drove home on 290 West. End of August in Texas, 7 p.m., and the sun was still brutal. I was thinking about getting home, taking a cold shower, hugging the little guy, then getting some decent sleep. When I turned into our driveway, I saw that something wasn't right. A red sign was stuck in the front yard, sold printed in big letters. I blinked a few times, thought I was seeing things from exhaustion. 6 days of not enough sleep, maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the sign was still there, blazing red like it was laughing in my face. Then I saw Milo. My son was sitting outside the iron gate, back against the post, with an old gym bag next to him. Alone. A tiny shadow in the middle of that big yard, hunched over like an abandoned animal. Nobody around at all. No grandparents, no babysitter, not a single adult in sight. My heart felt like someone had punched it hard. I slammed the brakes, forgot to turn off the engine, bolted out of the car, and ran toward my kid. It was only about 100 feet, but my legs felt like I was running through quicksand, each step stretching like a mile. My mind was spinning with 100 questions. Why was Milo here? Where were my parents? Why was there a sold sign? What the hell was happening? What Milo told me in the next 10 minutes completely changed everything I'd ever believed about my family. When I got close, Milo looked up at me, and that image, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was exactly like the day he was 5, when he realized Mom was never coming home again. That day, he didn't cry either. He just sat there silent, staring into space, like his soul had left his body. That afternoon was the same. That look had haunted me for 3 years, and there it was in front of me again. I knelt in front of him. Milo's lips were cracked and dry, his cheeks and neck red from sunburn, his eyes looking at me dazed, like he couldn't believe I was real. I put my hand on his forehead, burning hot. I quickly asked him, "Are you okay? Where are Grandpa and Grandma?" Milo didn't answer, just reached up and wrapped his arms around my neck. Those tiny arms squeezed tight like he was scared I'd disappear. I knew I needed to get him out of this heat first. I picked Milo up, ran to the car, put him in the passenger seat, and cranked the AC full blast. Luckily, I had a few water bottles in the trunk. I opened one, held it to his lips and said gently, "Drink slowly." Small sips. The little guy drank like he hadn't had water in hours, which was probably true. When Milo's breathing slowed, I sat in the driver's seat, turned to look at him, and asked, "How long were you sitting out there?" The little guy shook his head, voice still hoarse, and answered, "I don't know. A really long time, since the sun was way up there." He pointed up at the sky, where now there was just a streak of blazing sunset. I did the math in my head. School let out at 3. Now it was almost 7 p.m. 5-6 hours. An 8-year-old kid, alone, in heat that could hit 100 degrees, not a soul passing by. I took a deep breath, tried to keep my voice calm, and asked, "Tell me what happened." Milo started telling me, his voice breaking. At noon, Dad picked up Milo from school like always. But that day he was pleased and kept whistling the whole drive. The little guy said when he got in the car, Dad turned around, smiled, and told him, "Today's a special day." Instead of going back to my parents' house like usual, Dad drove Milo straight to our house. When he parked outside the gate, he looked at Milo and ordered, "Go inside and pack the most important stuff in a bag. Hurry up." Milo didn't understand. He asked my dad, "Why do I have to pack stuff?" Dad answered him, voice casual like he was talking about the weather. "This house is sold. You're not living here anymore." When I heard this, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. But I didn't interrupt. Let him keep going. The little guy said he panicked, grabbed Dad's arm, and whispered, "But this is my house." Dad pulled his arm free, shook his head, and replied, "Not anymore. Someone else bought it." Then Milo asked him a question that, when I heard it, my throat closed up. "What about Mom's stuff, Grandpa?" An 8-year-old kid, in the middle of panicking about losing his house, was the first thing he thought about. Dad looked at him and answered like this, "Your mom died a long time ago. Stuff is just stuff. Dead people don't need things. Living people need to let go." I closed my eyes for a second. Dad said that to his own grandson, to a kid who'd lost his mother less than 3 years ago. Milo kept going. He'd cried and begged Dad to let him bring Mom's pillow. Dad said yes, but rushed him because there's still a lot to do. The little guy ran into the house, arms around the pillow Rachel used to use, shoved a few outfits into his gym bag, then ran back out. He thought he'd get to go to Grandpa and Grandma's house. But no. Dad stopped the car right outside the iron gate, exactly where I'd just found him. Milo's voice got quieter as he told me what Grandpa said to him. Grandma and Aunt Vivian and I are going far away. You wait here for your dad. The little guy asked him, Where? Can I come? Dad shook his head and answered, To France, to stay with Aunt Vivian. You can't come. You wait here for your dad. He'll be home soon. Milo said he begged Dad to let him wait inside the house, or at least in the car where it was cool. But Dad refused and told him, The house isn't ours anymore. You can't go in. I have to get to the airport, or I'll be late. Then he drove away. Didn't turn back to wave. Didn't look back. Milo looked down at the pillow he was holding, voice shaking as he told me. I tried to call, but I don't have a phone. I tried not to cry because Grandpa always says boys don't cry. But I was so scared, Dad. Then the little guy looked up at me, eyes red and swollen, asked me a question that felt like someone was squeezing my heart. I was scared you'd go to France too. Are you going to leave? Right in that moment, something inside me shattered. I hugged him tighter, felt Milo's tiny body trembling in my arms. The little guy was still clutching Mom's pillow, the only thing he'd managed to bring with him. For 3 years, I'd left him with my parents every time I flew without a single doubt. For 3 years, I thought no matter what happened, Grandpa and Grandma would always protect their grandson. My hand was shaking when I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Part of me still hoped this was just a misunderstanding, but the other part already knew the answer. I dialed Dad's number, and what I heard in that phone call was worse than anything I could have imagined. While waiting for the call to connect, I thought Dad wouldn't dare pick up, or he'd see my name and hit decline. But he answered after 3 rings, his voice so cheerful it made my skin crawl. Behind his voice was the familiar chaos of sounds. Announcement speakers, suitcase wheels rolling on the floor, a kid crying somewhere. Airport. Dad was at the airport. As soon as he picked up, Dad's voice was excited like he'd just won the lottery. Graham, are you back? Great, great. I was gonna call you before we boarded. I swallowed hard, tried to keep my voice normal, and asked him, Where are you? Dad answered casually, Austin Bergstrom. Mom and I are flying to Paris tonight, gonna stay with Vivian for a while. Sounded like he was talking about a 2-week vacation, but I knew it wasn't. The sold sign in the yard had said everything. I looked over at Milo. The little guy was staring at me, lips still cracked and dry, eyes still red. Looking at him, I tried to swallow the rage building up, then turned away and asked Dad, Milo, where did you leave Milo? Dad answered lightly on the other end. At home waiting for you, where else? Haven't you picked him up yet? He called, dumping his grandson outside the gate, at home waiting for you. That answer hit me like a bucket of cold water to the face. I couldn't hold back anymore, and I almost yelled into the phone. You left the little guy alone outside the gate from after school until now. 6 hours. Outside. No water. No phone. Do you know how hot it was today? Silence on the other end for a moment. That silence wasn't from guilt. I heard Dad take a breath. Then he answered in an annoyed voice. He's fine. Isn't he? You always blow things out of proportion. I still had to deal with check-in, luggage, and all kinds of stuff. Didn't have time to sit around waiting for you to get back. Trying to control my anger, I gritted my teeth and asked him, what if my flight got delayed? What if I didn't come back today? Were you planning to leave him sitting on the street all night? Instead of answering my question, Dad barked through the phone. Well, you did come back, didn't you? Why all the what-ifs and suppose? I did everything for this family. Don't you see that? The moment I heard those words, I laughed, a bitter laugh, and asked him back. Family? You sold my house and dumped my kid on the street. That's your idea of family? Dad's voice suddenly got softer, like he was trying to explain something to a 3-year-old. Graham, listen to me. Vivian needs us. She's all alone in France, her husband works all day, and she has nobody to talk to. And you've got a good job, a high salary. How hard could it be to buy another house? Buy another house. He talked like that house was just 4 walls. I asked him back, voice cold. What about Rachel's stuff? That house was left to us by her parents. Hearing Rachel's name, Dad sighed heavily, then answered, Rachel died 3 years ago, son. 3 years. Clinging to dead people's stuff isn't healthy. You need to move on. Milo too. The little guy needs to get away from that house full of memories. I'm helping you. You don't realize it. The moment I heard those words, I wanted to slam my phone into the steering wheel. But I just sat there, hands clenched so tight my knuckles ached. Without waiting for me to respond, Dad continued in a rushed voice. Anyway, I gotta go. They're calling our gate now. You take care of Milo. Once we get settled over there, I'll call back. He hung up. Didn't wait for me to say another word. Didn't ask if his grandson was okay. Not one word of apology. I stared at my phone screen, which was dark as it went. The rage in my chest hadn't cooled, but I needed to know one more thing. I dialed Vivian. My sister picked up immediately, voice chirpy. You're back? I'm at the gate, we're about to board. I asked straight up, no beating around the bush. Do you know what Dad did to Milo? Vivian went silent. The silence stretched for several seconds, long enough for me to hear her swallow through the phone. Then she stammered back. Dad said, he just left him waiting for you, so she knew. I spoke slowly to my sister, word by word. Dad dumped my kid outside the gate of a house he sold. Alone. 6 hours. So he could catch a flight to France with you. Silence stretched on. Then, instead of apologizing or asking about her nephew, Vivian's voice completely changed. She snapped back at me, cold and hard. You're blaming me again. Always the same. Since we were kids. Everything's always my fault. I shot back. You knew Dad sold my house. You know where that money went. At the mention of money, Vivian started crying. But not the guilty kind of crying. The angry crying of a kid caught stealing candy. She screamed at me. You always have everything. Good job, high salary, nice house. You only lost your wife. But you act as if the whole world owes you. What do I have? I had to leave everything in America to start over in a foreign country. Do you know how hard that is? My ears rang. My sister's words hit me like a drill. I asked my sister back, voice shaking from trying to control my anger. What did you just say? I only lost my wife? Vivian realized she'd said too much. She stuttered. I didn't mean it like that. I hung up. I just wanted to let you know that I didn't need to hear more. Milo was still sitting quietly next to me, both arms wrapped tight around Mom's pillow. The little guy didn't ask anything, just looked at me with eyes way older than they should be. Maybe he'd heard everything. Perhaps he understood it all. They thought I couldn't do anything, the way they always thought I just quietly put up with everything. The way they always saw me was as the good son who never made a fuss. But this time they were dead wrong. When the call with Vivian ended, I sat in the car, looking at my stolen house. And old memories came flooding back like a dam burst. I remembered when I was 10, the new bike I'd been begging for all year. Mom and Dad bought it, and I hadn't even taken one ride when Vivian cried for it. Mom looked at me with that familiar expression and said, "You're the big brother. Let her have it." I did. That bike. I never got to touch it again. When I was 16, I had a room with a window overlooking the backyard that I'd had since I was little. Vivian said my room was prettier. Dad knocked on my door and said, "Boys don't need scenery. Move to the other room." I moved. When I was 22, Dad gave me an old car for college. Vivian graduated and needed a work vehicle. Dad called and told me, "You have a salary now, buy yourself a new car. Leave that one for her." I did. Every time I told myself I'm the big brother. Letting her have things is right. Every time I thought, if I'm generous enough, she'll grow up and learn to appreciate it. Every time I was wrong. When Rachel died, Mom and Dad offered to watch Milo for me. At the time, I was so grateful. I thought they cared about me, cared about my kid. I thought finally the family had my back when I needed them most. But it turned out to be just a trap. A perfect act dragged out while they waited for the right moment. Maybe my giving in for so long made them think I'd stay silent forever. They could mess with me, fine. I could take it. But mess with my son. Mess with what's left of Rachel, no way. This time, they weren't getting away from me. I looked over at the passenger seat. Milo had fallen asleep from exhaustion, head leaning against the seat, both arms still clutching Mom's pillow, the sunburn on his cheeks glowing red under the car's interior light. While my son was nearly passing out from heat stroke on the street, they were sitting in the air-conditioned comfort of the airport, waiting for their flight to a new life. I had two choices. One was to let them go, then hire international lawyers to fight back and forth, which could take years and hundreds of thousands of dollars with no guarantee of getting anything back. 2 were called the police right now. The decision took less than 30 seconds. I dialed 911. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. I reported Milo's condition, described what had happened, and told them my parents were at Austin Bergstrom Airport, about to board a flight to Paris. The dispatcher confirmed that this was a serious violation of Texas child protection laws and that they would contact airport security immediately. They asked if I wanted to file charges formally. I didn't hesitate. Yes. After hanging up with the police, I called Marcus next, an old college friend who's now a real estate lawyer. I explained the situation in a few minutes. Marcus listened, his voice getting serious, and asked me, "Did you sign any power of attorney documents for your dad?" I answered, "Only limited power of attorney to handle Milo-related emergencies. Nothing to do with real estate." Marcus was quiet for a few seconds, then told me, "Then they forged your signature or the power of attorney. This is a felony, forgery, which could mean jail time." He paused a beat, then asked, "Has the transaction closed yet?" I answered, "There's a sold sign in front of the house. The locks have been changed. Dad said the house was sold." Marcus told me, voice firm, "Listen to me. Whether the transaction closed or not, if they forged the authorization, then the entire transaction is void. This is the house your wife inherited. You're the beneficiary after she dies. Nobody has the right to sell it but you." Then he added, "Tomorrow morning, I'll contact the title company to verify. Don't worry, the house is still yours." I hung up, and then began the longest 45 minutes of my life. I drove to Dell Children's Hospital nearby. The doctor examined Milo, confirmed my son had mild dehydration and first-degree sunburn, gave him 4 fluids and applied medication. While waiting, I sat by his bed, watching the little guy sleep with the 4 in his arm. I thought about Rachel. If she were still alive, what would she say? Maybe she'd hug me and say, "I trust you." Rachel always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I thought about my parents. For all the years I tried to be a good son. About all the times I told myself, family comes first, and swallowed every injustice about how they looked at Vivian like she was a treasure, while I was just a tool for giving in. 9:27. Phone buzzing. Unknown number, but the Austin area code. My heart pounded as I picked up. A man's voice came through. "Mr. Graham Foster? This is Officer Reynolds from the Austin Police Department. Airport security has detained Mr. Raymond Foster and Mrs. Diane Foster for questioning regarding charges of child abandonment. They were stopped right before boarding." I asked back, "What about my sister?" Officer Reynolds answered, "MS. Vivian Foster wasn't detained since she wasn't directly involved in watching the child. But she chose to stay with her parents instead of boarding the plane." I don't know what I felt in that moment. Relief? Pain? Victory? Loss? Maybe all of it at once, as someone had just lifted a boulder off my chest, but at the same time placed a different boulder on my heart. I looked down at Milo sleeping, hands still clutching that keepsake. Whatever happened next, at least tonight, they couldn't escape. A lot of people ask why I didn't race straight to the airport, make some dramatic confrontation like in the movies. But why? I'd been giving in to them my whole life. This time, I wanted them to understand one thing. I don't need to stand in front of anyone to make them pay the price. While Milo was in the hospital, my phone kept buzzing nonstop. Police department calling, airport security calling, and of course, the people who'd just been stopped at the boarding gate were calling too. Through Officer Reynolds, I found out what happened. My parents and Vivian were standing in line to board when 2 security officers walked up. Can you imagine? That feeling of thinking you'd already won. Then suddenly someone taps your shoulder and says, "Please come with us." How bitter that must have been. Laurent, Vivian's husband, was allowed to go since he wasn't involved. You know what he did? He flew ahead to Paris. Alone. Left his wife behind to deal with it. I don't blame him. Who wouldn't want to run from this mess? And Dad? Officer Reynolds said he screamed in the middle of the airport, loud enough that the whole area turned to look. "Do you know who I am? My son is a pilot. He used my job to threaten people while being detained for abandoning his own grandson." When I heard that, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Vivian kept calling me nonstop. 10 times. 20 times. The screen kept lighting up, then going dark, then lighting up again. For the first time in my life, she was calling, and I wasn't picking up. Mom just sat silent in the interrogation room, face white as paper. Maybe she was the only one who understood that this time, her son wasn't playing around. As for us, after the doctor confirmed Milo was stable, I took him to a hotel near the hospital. The house had new locks and I couldn't get in. I wasn't ready to face anyone right now either. All night, the phone sat on the table, screen lighting up constantly. I didn't answer, but I read everything. Dad texted, all caps. You called the cops on your father? Are you insane? You're not my son anymore. Mom texted, Graham, please drop the charges. Dad's old, he can't handle this. Vivian texted, you ruined everything. Are you happy now? I read it all, looked over at Milo sleeping, and didn't care about any of it. The next morning, Vivian posted on Facebook, people are willing to send their elderly parents to jail for money. Last night was the most horrific night of my life. Relatives jumped into the comments immediately. Aunt Patty wrote, oh my God, how did it come to this? Uncle Robert wrote, really did that? Over a house? Aunt Linda wrote, parents are old even if they're wrong. It's because they love their kids. Dozens of comments like that. Not one person asked how Milo was. In their eyes, my parents were the victims. I commented under Vivian's post with just one line. Ask her what Dad did to his 8-year-old grandson before heading to the airport. Ask that first, then judge. Then I locked my Facebook. The next afternoon, Marcus called with news. He told me the house sale was void because the power of attorney signature was forged. The house was still my legal property. It would take a few months to complete the paperwork to get it back. I just breathed a sigh of relief when Marcus continued. Dad had already received $40,000 in earnest money from the buyer and transferred it all to Vivian. Plane tickets, deposit on a house in Lyon, everything. The money had already flown to France. Dad would have to pay that money back to the buyer, and where he'd get it from was his problem. Within 48 hours, I went from being a son, grandson, and brother in the family to being a traitor in the eyes of the entire extended family. But all of this was nothing compared to what happened in the months that followed. After the night of being detained at the airport, my parents were released but had to sign an agreement not to leave the country and appear when the court summoned them. The flight they'd booked was no longer available. The ticket money couldn't be refunded. As for me, airlines need pilots with stable mental states to ensure passenger safety. And my mental state at that time wasn't stable at all. I took an extended leave because I knew Milo needed me there more than ever. My son changed completely after what happened. The little guy didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't demand anything. He was just terrifyingly silent. Every time I took a call related to Grandpa and Grandma, Milo would quietly get up and go to his room in the apartment I was renting temporarily. I knew the little guy was hiding something, but I didn't know how to get him to open up. As for them, even though they tried every way to contact me, I refused them all. Let's meet in court where everything is clearly judged. After 4 months of investigation and multiple postponements, the trial for the real estate document forgery case finally took place at Travis County Court in Austin. I sat on one side with Marcus. My parents sat on the other side with their defense lawyer. For the first time in 4 months, I saw their faces. Dad had aged a lot, grayer hair, more hunched back, but his eyes were still full of rage when he looked at me. Mom was skeletal, with eyes sunken deep. She kept her head down and didn't dare look at anyone. The trial went faster than I expected. The evidence was clear. Forged signature. Milo's statement at the hospital. Police report. The judge found defendant Raymond Foster guilty of forging legal documents, sentenced him to 2 years probation, prohibited him from leaving the country during the probation period, and ordered him to compensate the home buyer for the canceled transaction. The child abandonment charge was recorded as a violation since Milo wasn't seriously physically injured. When the judge finished sentencing, I stood up to leave, but Dad stood up too, and that was also the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment he could no longer keep up the mask of a pitiful father betrayed by his son. The moment everyone present in the courtroom would see his true self. He walked straight toward me, face red with anger, finger pointing at my face, and screamed in the middle of the court. Are you satisfied now? Your parents raised you for so many years, fed you, educated you, and you drag your parents to court like criminals. Court officers moved in to intervene, but Dad pushed their hands away and continued yelling, "For a house! For a house, you drove your parents to the wall. What kind of son are you?" I stood still. Mom Diane sat behind him, sobbing uncontrollably. Seeing this, Dad lowered his voice, but every word was like a knife. "I raised you to treat your parents like this? I'd rather have raised a dog. At least it would know loyalty. And you? I regret ever having you." In that moment, I looked straight into Dad's eyes, for the first time not bowing my head, not giving in, and asked him back, "So what kind of grandfather are you?" Dad froze. His face went pale. His mouth moved, but no words came out. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Mom crying and Dad screaming, "You'll regret this. You'll regret today." I didn't look back, because to me, my family had died the moment they treated my son like an object. After the trial, my parents didn't have money for compensation. Their retirement pension was barely enough to live on. In the end, they had to sell their own house to pay the debt, then move into a small rental apartment in East Austin. Vivian was still in France, but the house in Lyon she'd put a deposit on, she no longer had the money to buy. She sent me exactly one final email. "You destroyed the whole family's life for a house. Hope you and that house are happy together. Don't contact me anymore." I read it, didn't reply, then blocked her completely. For months after the trial, the house was officially returned to me. The day we moved back, Milo walked into the living room, stood in the middle of the house, and looked around. Then the little guy cried. No sound. Tears just streamed down his cheeks without any sobs. I hugged him, and father and son stood in the living room for a long time. I thought everything would gradually be okay. I thought when we came back to this house, Milo would sit in Mom's room like before. But no, the little guy never stepped into that room again. He'd walk past the door like the room didn't exist. One night, Milo came to me, arms around Mom's pillow, and said, "Dad, I want to take this to my room." I asked him, "Why? Don't you want to keep it in Mom's room anymore?" The little guy shook his head, voice tiny. "I don't want to go in there anymore, Dad. Every time I do, I remember what Grandpa said." Dad's words that day had broken something inside Milo. Mom's room, where the little guy used to feel peaceful, had now become a place that brought back the worst memory. I got the house back, but there was one thing I couldn't get back: the way my son looked at his mother's room as a safe place, and that's something I'll never forgive. More than a year has passed since everything happened. Since the trial, I haven't received any news from my parents or Vivian. Maybe they've accepted cutting ties with me, or perhaps they're busy facing their new life, dealing with the consequences of their own decisions. I don't know, and honestly, I don't want to know anymore. As for me, work has stabilized again. I found a lovely middle-aged couple to babysit Milo. They take care of him when I'm flying, and the garden that Rachel planted before. But I'm applying to transfer to domestic routes, short flights, and home the same day. I don't want to be away from him anymore. A month ago, when I was getting ready to board a flight to Hong Kong, one of my last international flights, Milo suddenly grabbed my hand. The little guy looked at me, eyes different from every other day, then said quietly, "Dad, yesterday I saw Mom. In a dream. For the first time, Dad." My heart skipped a beat. I thought he was going to tell me about a nightmare. But no. Milo told me about Rachel's smile, about how she stroked his hair, about the gentle voice he still remembered, and about what Mom said in the dream. "I'm proud of you." When he finished, the little guy stood up, walked straight toward Mom's room. He stopped at the door, turned to look at me, and said, "Mom lives forever in my heart, Dad, because she's my mom. No matter what anyone says, I still remember Mom." Then he walked in, sat down on the bed, just like he used to do before everything happened. Maybe Milo was old enough to understand that what adults say isn't always right, and love for Mom isn't something anyone can take away. At a recent parent-teacher conference, his teacher told me that when asked about grandparents in a family assignment, Milo had answered, "I have grandparents, but they did wrong, so they have to be punished. I hope someday they'll understand." I don't know if I can be as forgiving as my son. I know that from now on, I'll teach him to live with integrity and honesty. Give in when it's worth giving in, but don't let anyone walk all over you. Love your family, but don't accept being hurt because of it. That's the end of my story. Before closing, I want to ask you guys, was I wrong to call the police to stop my family at the airport? Was I too cruel to take my own parents to court? If you were Milo, how would you have answered the teacher's question? Please feel free to leave your comments below. If you like this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for listening. See you in the following stories.